Welcome to Billy Bob's Punk and Ska Album of the Month. This month, February 2023, I am featuring Play Cell by Tilt. It came out in June 4th of 1993. And I actually got a hold of a Cinder block and asked her a whole bunch of questions about Tilt, which we're going to jump here right into here in a second. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and click that fucking bell thing and all the other bullshit. And we're gonna cut into all that right now. Later. How did you first find yourself into music? And what was your first few bands? Was Spam Grenades your first band?
Well, there was a couple of iterations before that. I think we were called the Vexed for a while, Vexed. And I know there was another band called Vex around in the 80s. And then before that, we were Children with Special Needs, which probably wouldn't be a PC name nowadays, but it seemed like it fit. It was appropriate for the group of people we had. It seems like every time we changed drummers, we changed our sound a little bit and we changed our name. So finally, when we got the drummer that we did, we changed to Spam Grenades. And that's when we really in earnest started writing songs. I remember my favorite song was Credit Card Justice, and it was about Reagan. That's how old I am. I remember Reagan real well. I remember Nancy Reagan and the Just Say No war on drugs real well. That was one of the reasons that punks like us rebelled. So I think really to go back and answer your question in earnest, my brother was a DJ at the local radio station. It was the first FM station in the town. I come from a town called Lincoln, Nebraska, which is the capital of Nebraska. About 100,000 people when I lived there. And the stadium, when it was filled for the Cornhusker games, was the third largest city in Nebraska. It was about 70,000 people. So on those days, we couldn't really park. But anyway, my brother was a DJ in the very first FM station called KFMQ. Then he was a hippie, and he was a rather radical hippie. He led some anti-war, anti-Vietnam War marches and introduced bands at Pershing Auditorium, which was our local inside arena. I remember my first concert was going to see a band called 10 Years After, which I don't know if anybody remembers now, but they were awesome at the time. I remember some of my brother's hippie friends putting me up on their shoulders and getting high from the fumes because they were all smoking pot. He influenced me a lot. He liked the edgier stuff. He liked Bowie. He liked MC5 and Iggy Pop and The Doors, and a lot of his influences became my influences, and especially the ones with words that were interesting and meant something to me. The bands who had lyricists who were poets as well really interested me because I wanted to be a writer when I was a little kid. So I just perused through his yards and yards of vinyl records and had carte blanche to play them all, and it was really great. No one shielded kids back then from any kind of adult material. If you could find a stack of Playboys in your dad's basement, you could have at it if you wanted. Those are pretty tame, actually, for what's going on now. But so I was exposed to a lot of great material. My dad was a theater professor at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. of which I am also an alumni. I'm a theater brat. He directed over 400 plays, and he was not preaching to the choir. He was an old school um, baby boom. He was the grand generation, the one that created the baby booms. My two younger brothers are boomers, and I'm a Gen Xer. That's what I identify anyway. But he stopped counting after directing over 400 plays, and the plays that he directed were um, sort of um, abstract, plays with ideas that were revolutionary at the time. Uh, Everything from Brendan Behan to Beckett to um, well, and he even directed a lot of Shakespeare, which Shakespeare was a punk. When you read the scripts, he was way ahead of his time. So I had a lot of different influences, and I had a lot of different literary influences. I liked the beat poets. Um, I liked Bob Dylan, of course, all that hippie stuff. But am I doing okay on your first question?
You're doing
Because
great.
I could go on and tell you, because really getting into music, I wanted a harder edge, because to me, hippies weren't quite doing it. I saw hippies changing. They went from radicals who were fighting the war and protesting to religiously converted happy families. And they weren't solving the world's problems like we were hoping. And there came a time in the 70s when, we had an energy crisis, we had a housing crisis, we had lack of jobs for young people, lack of opportunities. And we were disillusioned as far as politics, because we had gone through Watergate and saw no repercussions for criminals. So that's when we started believing the fix was in politically. And so I became more politicized. Uh, Both my brothers were eligible for the Vietnam War, and one of them was drafted, but evaded the draft and ended up in jail for a while. The other one had his number stopped right before he got drafted, and I was deathly afraid when I was a child that my brothers would come home in body bags, like a lot of my friends' brothers did. So the war really affected me, and they didn't. There was no news blackout back then. Walter Cronkite was showing footage from Vietnam with dead American Marines piled up and rotting. So that put the fear into me that might end up like my brothers. So I think at that point it really politicized me. So I became more interested in edgy, rebellious type music. I was also an Alice Cooper head, a horror fan, was horror movie fan from the get-go, since I saw Frankenstein and Dracula in black and white when I was something like 4 or 5 years old. So I loved Alice Cooper. I went to see Alice Cooper in 1973. My mother took me, let me rush the stage while she stuffed cotton in her ears and set up in the stand. And that set me on a path of reading lyrics and acting out lyrics in my room like we all did, pretending to be rock stars. And it really kind of never left me. I ended up majoring in theater in college, and I realized that I could go the directing route. I could go the acting route. I wrote a couple plays. I acted in a couple of plays. I wrote a punk rock opera back before it was cool, back in 1983. It was called Hubris. It was based on the Agamemnon myth. But I realized that to go that route, very few people make, a success. very, very few people, even the good ones, fail, you know. So I thought, wait a minute, what can I do to write my own material, perform my own material, and actually have a chance to be seen and heard? Hey, I could start a band. So really, that's what I did, and that worked out. It in a really strange way. I was able to write my own material and perform my own material and do it my way with no one ever telling me what's what. That was especially hard for a woman in those days. The first band I started was something like 82 or 83. By that time, I really got into the punk rock scene through mixtapes, mind you, because there's no internet, through mixtapes, one of which I got while I was hitchhiking when it was safe to hitchhike. I was hitchhiking, a car full of boys picked me up, three of whom were visiting from LA, and they had a mixtape with X and Black Flag and Fear and all these great bands that they gave me. And that really opened up a door to a whole different kind of music because you couldn't just get that stuff at the record store. Every now and then at a head shop, you'd find a vinyl record of like the Sex Pistols, but they were few and far between. So that's how I got into music.
Everyone knows I'm on a crying track. Baby, no matter, do it all the time. I could tell you. Do you want me to tell you?
Whose idea was it to start making t-shirts and form out of the cinder block ink?
Whose idea? Well, I like to claim the idea for myself because that was the job I got when I first went from Nebraska to Northern California. I worked for a guy who was vending t-shirts on a college campus. And I thought, he can do it. I guess I can do it. So I basically bought a book at Nolo Press called How to Make T-Shirts for Fun and Profit. And taught you how to build a one-by-one frame and staple fabric to it and by that time they had photo emulsion. Before that you used to cut out the design on rubylith, but we had photo emulsion, and I learned how to do it myself, and I just started printing my band's shirts, and we started printing other people's bands shirts, and then we started selling on Telegraph Avenue back when that was a thing, when they used to have crowds and crowds of street vendors selling their wares on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley. Same place that they had protests about People's Park. Same place where there were protests about the Vietnam War. Same place where there was a history of activism. But now, at that time, when I was there in the late 80s, early 90s, it had turned into a street fair, an everyday street fair. You had to go to a lottery to get your place. And I would set up in front of Blondie's Pizza and get to know the people that worked at Blondie's Pizza who had different colored hair. And they would give me free pizza and I would sell t-shirts. So what was the question?
Well, I think you asked was whose idea was to start the t-shirt company.
Oh yeah, I guess it was mine, but you know, my husband at the time, Jeffrey Bischoff, who was also the guitar player for Tilt, was sort of the motor behind it, because I thought it might be kind of cool to start a t-shirt business. He's like, absolutely, it would be great to start a t-shirt business. Let's do it. So we did, and we were well matched in our with our different talents, and it just worked out somehow.
Tell us about the formation of Tilt and the self-release cassette.
You're asking me a question about stuff I don't remember. The self-released cassette. Are you talking about the $50 demo that we had Marshall Stacks record at Gilman Street?
Well, I guess
We had a couple of cassettes.
It's a Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's the cheapest place to do a demo was by far was Gilman Street because they had the whole setup, and you just you'd go and set up your gear on the stage, and Marshall Stacks, who was the engineer extraordinaire, producer extraordinaire of early Gilman Street. He just, we recorded everything in one take and used that for our first cassette. And I think that's what you mean. We did a couple of cassettes, but that was the first one with, all our first songs, all 6 of them, or 4, or many that were on there.
According to Discogs, it was a 4-track cassette, which had 2 of the 4 songs that ended up being on your 7-inch that was released.
Yeah. Okay. So that sounds like it. That sounds like the $50 demo that we did with Marshall Stacks, which I feel turned out to be one of our best recordings.
Awesome. So is that how you found yourself on Lookout?
Probably. I mean, we lived in the East Bay. We knew people that played Gilman. We played Gilman a couple of times back in the early days. Green Day actually rehearsed a few blocks away from us on 7th Street down there. We were on 8th and Pine Street. Later, that whole warehouse got knocked down. The warehouse that we lived in got knocked down because after the earthquake in '89, they rebuilt the freeway through it. But yeah, I feel like I'm being disjointed, but I feel disjointed, so I'm just going to keep it 100%.
You may say I'm newborn, easy street, and you can't make anything you wanna say.
I love the album Play Cell. It was your first full length release. Tell me a bit about that album and that era.
So yeah, a lot of those songs actually were first on the House of Faith demo that Bart Thurber did, and it was when House of Faith was in Palo Alto, and that's also a great recording. I love that recording. But then Lookout wanted to re-record. Oh, you were asking how we got on Lookout. I don't really know. I think that we were just in that scene, and Larry heard about us, and someone said we were cool, and maybe he saw us, and he came to one of our practices and laid down the law, and we said okay, on a handshake. So that's how we got on Lookout. Someone else in the band would tell a different story. I don't know. Now I forget the question that you just asked.
I was asking about Play Cell.
Oh, Play Cell, yeah.
Tell me a bit about that era.
Well, our like I said, our rehearsal studio was in Phoenix Ironworks, which was a huge 32, that was it, like our part was like 32,000 square feet. The rest of it was as big as a city block. It was this huge steel structure that had been a steelworks that actually produced boats for World War II back in the day. Then it had been divided up, and different businesses were there, and us punks and hippies got one little corner of it. 50-foot ceilings. You had to build your own room. That's where we built our rehearsal studio, and that's where we wrote Play Cell. Some of the songs I already had lyrics to. I'm a great recycler. If I have raw material from one band, I'll use it for another one. Or if I don't really like the song that that happened the first time, I'll use it again. And I don't know. Some people don't like that, but I don't care. I like to, if I like something, I like it, and I'll use bits and pieces of it and reuse it who cares? It's all a process. That time, so Jeffrey and I were living above our practice space in Phoenix Ironworks, which was crazy because we had no roof on our room. Our practice space did, of course, because our room was above, but our bedroom had no, we kind of ran out of money for lumber, so we didn't build, and we didn't really need a roof on our room, but the steel superstructure was about, oh, I don't know, 30 feet above us. And you could hear the rain come down. And I think that and you could also hear the other businesses clanging and making strange industrial noises. You'd think I would sound like Nine Inch Nails or something, but it didn't translate to industrial music for me. It translated to play cell in a way. But the whole place was filled with artists and different kind of art installations. There was our roommate Steve Heck built an entire room that he called a piano bell out of junked pianos. It's a long story how he got the junked pianos, but the ones that weren't usable, weren't fixable, he bolted together and made rooms out of. So there's a big piano bell, he called it, right in front of, it was like 3 pianos high, both grands and uprights. And it was right in front of our practice space. And when we had parties, people would come with different things like hammers and drumsticks, and they'd beat on the exposed strings of the piano. That's why they called it a piano bell. So that was inspiring to me as well. I don't think that any of this I'm telling you really says anything about the lyrics, but it speaks to the general sense of creativity that there was at the time. The do-it-yourself grassroots movement was going strong. People were starting their own businesses. People were starting their own venues. You know, Gilman Street was a membership. It wasn't a club. It was a membership. We all owned it. People like my friends, when they got the pianos that were wrecked, they took the good ones and they started their own piano company called Immortal Piano Company. Of course, our friends that lived down the street started their own printing press. People, and so we decided to start the t-shirt thing at the same time. But anyway, the entire feeling of the time was, to hell with society, to hell with the people that are making the laws and calling the shots. We're going to do it ourselves. We're going to do what we're going to provide for our own needs and the needs of other people in our scene. So it was all, you know, handmade 7 inches, like handmade 7-inch covers, and it was great. It was really great. Handmade t-shirts and posters, and that was the pinnacle of the time for flyers and stickers. We were in a sticker war with Rancid till we hand printed something like 30,000 tilt stickers with the truck logo on it and put them up everywhere. One was even on MTV. It was like such a big thing, you know, because we didn't have social media back then. So it was a big thing if you got on TV. But, you know, Rancid, they were giving us a run for their money. We were seeing them stuck, you know, up on light posts, the Rancid stickers on the toll booths on the Bay Bridge. It was a great, great time. And I mean, I guess that's the best way I could really describe the environment that Play Cell came out of. So that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
Awesome.
We can win, we can unravel, keep on sleeping right through our travels.
But tell me a bit about Till It Kills. It came out in '95. It was your first release on Fat Records. How'd all that go down?
Yeah, that was a little bit different because Fat Mike really inspired us and made me feel personally empowered, because up until that point, I'd been fighting a lot of sexism and disregard. And he was a guy who believed in me and expressed that belief in me and got behind us and gave us enough money to record in a great studio. And so, we spent a little bit more time writing songs. And uh, we, oh, it was great. Kevin Army was the engineer, and he was the perfect engineer for that time. He got such a great performance out of me for Liable, and I curse him to this day because he got me to sing that really, really high note that was very difficult to hit when you had the flu on tour. But I'm glad he made me do it because it turned it into a great song. Gabe Moline brought that song to us, and then I put the melody, the vocal melody, and the lyrics to it. It just happened to work really well. People like it anyway. And then Fat Mike, put that particular song on a CD and distributed thousands of them on the first Warped Tour. Bless his heart, although he'd say something other than bless, something other than heart, frankly. No, I'm just kidding. He's a great guy. That was a great experience. It's very different because we just had more money, more respect, more empowerment, more inspiration. And I think, our writing skills started to gel just with the band itself. We'd been playing for a while now. A lot of our songs were road tested, and that's the thing. If you don't road test your songs, you don't really know if they're good or not. So we started to have a feel for each other and for the audience. And I think it shows in the record.
Sign up right now for the Academy to fit in so perfectly. Sign up right now for the Academy. You're just old school.
Collect Them
That's
All
fun.
is one of my favorite albums. Tell us a bit about that experience.
Well, that was different. That was a different tack. After spending all that time on Till It Kills, we just decided, hey, let's make a fast, short, sweet, rock and punk rock album. And we did. I didn't. I'm not saying I didn't spend any time on the lyrics. I spent a lot of time on the lyrics, but we sort of blocked out our rehearsal room to be a creative space and committed to I think it was 3 times a week getting together and writing and rehearsing, and came up to, and the whole overarching idea was to be fun, and it worked out. And then when we recorded it at the first Motor Studios location, which was on, I believe it was on Divisadero in the Lower Haight. I know this doesn't mean much to people that don't know the Bay Area, but it was in the basement of the house. It was an old Victorian house, and it was in the basement of the house that Anne Rice wrote Interview with the Vampire. She wrote Interview with the Vampire in the attic. This is the fable. Don't fact check me, anyone, but that's what we believed at the time. So that influenced us. And then I had a paranormal experience there, actually. My engineer, Ryan Green, who was absolutely wonderful, he really knew my voice. He knew when my voice was getting tired. He knew when my voice was off a little bit of pitch. He knew when I should do another take, and he knew how to get a good take out of me. And it was just he and I late at night, about 3 a.m. And there was I can't remember the song. I've written it down somewhere, but there was a chorus that I was starting to get tired, and he could tell, and he said, okay, this last one, just give it your all. And the very last note of the song was a long, belted out note. So I said, okay, I'll do the best I can. So I really belted it out. And then then the lights started going on and off really fast, as if Ryan was trying to inspire me by giving me some rock and roll lighting. Right. And then at the end, I got to the end of the long note, and the lights going on and off stopped immediately at the last beat. And then I said, thanks a lot for the rock and roll lighting effect there, Ryan. And he said, he looked at me with a very scared face and said, that wasn't me. And apparently, according to him, it was not the first or last time that he had a paranormal experience there, because the the flickering of the lighting was exactly in time with the beat, and it started from the very beginning of the chorus to the very last note of the chorus. And it hadn't happened for anyone else, hadn't happened that night, and it never happened again for anybody else. So what do you think of that? Maybe the vampire approved of my song, my performance, my vocal performance. I don't know. But that record was a lot of fun, and I got to have a lot of fun with more comedic subject matter in the songs.
Awesome.
Yeah, dental rec comes to mind. That was a pretty fun one to do.
Can you tell me a bit about Retching Red real quick?
Yeah, Retching Red. I was pretty angry at that point because I was in the middle of a divorce. That was, Jeffrey and I had our troubles, but we really stuck with it, and now we're the best of friends. But we both had different relationships with different people at the time, and the business was having its ups and downs, and I was going through my crazy midlife crisis, and I just wanted to get out there and thrash in the pit, and I did. I got a wireless mic, and I just went out in the middle of the audience and ran around and got in people's faces, and that was fun because people won't hit a woman. I know that doesn't sound very PC, but hell, I use that. I love getting in people's faces, especially the big tall guys. The expressions on their faces, they had no idea what to do with me. But that was really just a catharsis for me and having fun. We toured, we put out records. The guys in the band were great. The personnel changed, and I got to practice my skills of working with different musicians. So, I learned a lot. Had a lot of fun. We did a split 7-inch with the Twats. That was great. What were some of the other high points?
Butt trumpet
Just
cover.
we all got to go see Frankenstein's Castle in Germany, and yeah, it was just great. A lot of fun. It's a great excuse to go and check out the world being in a band, but make sure that you don't book your shows every night. Give yourselves a couple of days to enjoy the place where you're at. Things have changed. It's all about the internet now. I feel sorry for kids that don't have that. The whole world is on their screens. Why do they have to travel, especially in a pandemic? I hope we get back to that. I hope we can get back to people experiencing the world and learning, because you can't learn except by your own experience. So that's sage advice from an old lady sitting here in Kansas City. I hope you take it.
So that was pretty fucking sweet, right? I always appreciate it when the artists take the time to answer all the myriads of questions that I always throw at them. And make sure to check out on May 19th through the 21st, Cinder is going to be uh, giving tours of the newly established punk rock museum. So if you're in the area, make sure to check that out. Got to give a quick shout out to John Norwood over there at he's the administrator that runs the Tilt group on the fan club on Facebook. And thanks for checking out my video.